Welcome to Northbound Alaska, the Trucking Files, a podcast where we talk to haul road drivers, both past and present, to carry on the knowledge and experience of one of the toughest roads on Earth. On this episode, we sit down with Dave Smallwood. Dave began trucking the haul road in 1973, has 48 years of driving experience, and well over 4 million miles alone. We're in Bullhead, Arizona. We're with Dave Smallwood. Was it always Dave, or was it David when you were growing up?
It don't matter. I've been called a lot of stuff I won't even mention.
So, Dave, we always ask this question, but where were you brought up?
Fairbanks, Alaska, pretty much.
Okay.
Up till I went up there when I was 12 years old. I've always told everybody I was born and raised in Fairbanks, Alaska, because I was born in a communist country, California. So as far as anybody knows, so don't tell anybody.
All right, we'll keep that.
I was born in Fairbanks, Alaska.
We'll keep that on the down low. Aaron, how serious do you want to keep this interview? I mean, we're with Dave Smallwood here. You want to keep it a nice, well balanced here, or
It don't have to be real serious because there's nothing serious about me.
I think that answers it right there.
So okay, going back to, what was it, 1868 or whatever it was, when you followed General Custer.
I was in my grandfather's nutsack.
And Mike Scheidler, you guys were following General Custer, and then you guys ended up on the haul road. Is that true, or
It's
is
pretty
that
accurate? Pretty accurate.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. We got that out of the way. So you were born in California, moved to Fairbanks. What was that like growing up in Fairbanks in, what was that, the 70s, when you were going to high school then?
That was in the 60s.
Was it the 60s?
Yeah. I got to Fairbanks the first time in 1964. My dad had trucked out of Seattle to Fairbanks for Garrison Consolidated Freightways, and he met some people and he got a job in Fairbanks for Burgess Construction.
Huh.
And they were on the job out at Chattanooga. So in '64, I went to Alaska and stayed the summer in Chattanooga with my dad and my .22 pistol.
Nice. Did you fly up there?
I flew up there first time ever flew.
Is that too loud in your ears?
No.
Or you want me to turn? Okay, just making sure. So you flew. And so you were up there in the Chattanooga, you had your pistol. So what was that like? Were you hunting squirrels and rabbits and stuff like that? Or
anything didn't move. But it was, I forgot what I was going to say.
It's all good. So Chattanooga, you're up there in the Chattanooga hanging out, and your dad's driving truck around there.
Yeah, and I just run the countryside.
Well, so what was he? Where was he hauling freight at?
He was hauling dirt.
Dirt. Okay.
They were widening the road from the old Stees Highway.
So back then, a lot of people don't know this, but the road came from Central to Fairbanks, and it was probably 50 miles longer than it is now.
Oh,
right?
probably at least.
Because that road would just follow every single draw coming down to the draws or whatever, and so he was helping widen that and probably shortening that too.
Right.
Did you ever go with him in the truck back then?
Well, I would ride with him to the top of Cleary Summit, and then I'd get out and I'd hike all the way down to the valley and walk till I got to the bottom, and I'd jump in a truck and get a ride back to the lodge.
Huh.
Right on.
That's funny. It's weird to think about that Stees Highway, and is that too far away?
Just a little bit.
And then old Otto Bubenek had the lodge there, and we would go grouse hunting, and we'd get up. They had this old station wagon, this guy that worked there, and we'd get up, and we had a sofa tied down on the roof of this old Chevy station wagon. We'd sit up there with shotguns and going up the highway shooting grouse. And troopers pulled us over and said, "Kids, get off the top of that car. You can't be going down the road shooting birds." But we did that a lot. Got a lot of grouse.
That was a different time back then. Nowadays, they'd probably have their firearms out and be
They'd
like,
throw
"Drop
you
your gun." Yeah.
Throw you in jail.
Yeah. So that must have been pretty fun growing up like that, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you traveled back and forth for a while, huh? Back to California in the wintertime?
No, we were living in Vancouver, Washington.
Oh.
And I was in 7th grade. I got out of 7th grade and went up there for the summer. When I came back out, the end of October, got back down there, and Dad was going to move the family up there. And so he said, "Don't even bother starting school. You can do it in Fairbanks." Well, then they decided to go to California and visit a bunch of relatives. So we did a bunch of traveling. And by the time I got back, we got everything loaded up in it. We took a 1960 Pontiac Ventura with a trailer, and we all piled in and went to Alaska. And we got there so late that he said, "Well, no use starting school." He said, "You just wait till this next year." And I went to school, and instead of going into the 8th grade where I should have, I went into the 9th grade. And when my record showed up, the counselor called me in and said, "Well, you didn't go to the 8th grade." And I says, "No." I says, "But I'm not going back a year." She says, "Well, keep your grades up." So I went ahead and jumped a grade, but then in the 11th grade, I ended up dropping out of school. My dad drew me out of school because I wasn't going. I was skipping all the time, and he sent me to Prudhoe Bay as an apprentice oiler for Burgess Construction.
So how old were you when that happened? 16, 17, or?
Yeah, I was 8th or the 11th grade. I was
probably 17.
I was just getting ready to turn 18.
Okay.
But yeah, I went to Prudhoe Bay and went up there and worked 3 weeks, and I was making $500 a week. I had $1,500, and I quit. Went to town. My dad says, "What are you doing back?" I says, "Well, I got $1,500. That's more money than I'm ever going to need. I want to buy a car." He jumped up, and I says, "Where are we going?" He goes, "I'm going to buy you a damn car." He says, "And you're getting back on the plane and going back to work because you're going to be broke." He got a 1965 Chevy Impala SS.
Oh, wow.
And then I went back to work.
What color was that car?
It was red.
Oh, perfect.
I ended up selling that to Ajax years later.
So that was your first car? You didn't have a car when you were 16?
No, I was driving my dad's.
Yeah. Did you ever get into any trouble?
Oh, when I turned 16, yeah, I had a Ford 52 Ford pickup.
Okay.
Yeah. Me and Jack Allen and Cole Hollister, we rolled it over the first week I had that.
Oh, man.
What were you guys doing? Some donuts or Brodies or something?
No,
or what?
I was going down the highway, and I'd slam on the brakes and spin the whole thing sideways and ended up on its roof.
I did the same thing.
You did?
Me and Larry Turch.
Yeah. Turn that thing clear up onto its roof.
Yeah, yours was on Dawson Road, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, that was...
You got trying some fast maneuvers there, I think.
Yeah, Larry and I were goofing off. Not one of my finer moments.
So when I was up in Prudhoe as an apprentice oiler, I wanted to operate real bad, and they had we were building Dead Horse Airport, and they were running scrapers loading out of the Sag River right there, and at the end of the airport where we were building the airport, but the scrapers had come up there and they'd get stuck. Well, there was a spare D8 by my oiling shack, and foreman come running up there, and he says, "Hey," he says, "why aren't you getting on that cat and pushing these dozers? I don't need my push dozers coming from all the way over there to get them up that hill." He says, "Can you run that thing?" I says, "Well, yeah, I move it around here." He says, "Well, push them when they get stuck." So I'm like, oh boy, I get to operate. So I was just waiting for one to get stuck, and sure enough, here this guy gets up there, and he's in the middle of the damn road going up there, and so I get the dozer and raise the blade and get up against the Stinger. It was a twin-engine TS-24, and I firewalled the throttle and got up against that up against that thing, and we're going up, and it's wallering back and forth, and that blade popped off the Stinger, and I cut the rear engine clean in half. Totaled out the ass end of this scraper. Foreman comes running up there, and he's freaking out. And he says, "You're so fired." He says, "Get in the damn truck." He says, You're gonna tell Herb I'm not." Well, Herb was the superintendent, and he was a friend of my dad's. And so he takes me to the camp, and we go down the hallway to his office, and I reach down and open the door, and the foreman pushes me, and I trip and fall flat on my face inside the guy's office, and he's sitting there behind the desk, and he's like, "What's going on, Dave?" And I'm like about ready to hit this guy, you know. I says, I wrecked a scraper. He says, "What was you doing on the scraper?" I said, "Well, I wasn't on." I said, "I was in the D8 pushing him up the hill." He says, "Did you have the blade in float?" I says, "Float?" I said, "That's a heavy blade. I don't think it'll float." And he's like, turns to the foreman. He says, Did you tell this kid how to operate that thing?" He goes, "Well, he said he knew how to operate it." And he told me to go back to my job and stay off the equipment. And he turned to that foreman. He says, "You're fired. Pack your bags." And
Wow.
He fired that foreman. I guess he was already on thin ice. And so that night, when we went in the chow hall, I come walking in, and the whole crew stood up and started clapping. And I'm like, "What the hell is that?" He goes, "We've been trying to get rid of that guy for the past 2 months." He says, "You was here 3 days and got him fired." I was their hero.
Oh, man.
It must have felt great, though. Everybody cheering there.
Yeah,
in the chow
yeah.
hall. So would that have been like 69, 70?
That was 1969.
1969.
Probably March.
Okay.
Yeah, it was just March. Might have been into May.
So you've been up there for a long time.
Yeah.
So, okay, after that, when did you get in the truck, or did you always...
Well, what happened there was I worked another month or so, and my dad was telling me that the pipeline was getting delayed because all the legalities and all this stuff, and so I ended up joining the Navy, and in 1970, but I was only in for 8 months because I volunteered for Vietnam and went over there, was on a riverboat, and my dad lost both his kidneys, and I had 2 brothers at home, so I got a hardship discharge from the military and to come back and go back to work.
Wow, so you spent some time in Vietnam.
Yeah, I was there 2 months probably.
On one of those riverboats. I can't think what they're called.
It was, the PBRs.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was an LST, which was 300 feet long, flat bottom, where the bow opens up and the ramp comes down. It was made they originally were World War II for landing at Normandy, but they were using them over there, and we'd haul munitions and troops and stuff up and down the Mekong River.
So did you ever see any live combat?
A little bit,
Okay.
some mortar fire coming at us and stuff, but I didn't really see anything bad, no.
Yeah. So were you happy to get out of that situation?
Oh, what do you think? Yeah.
Yeah, I think everybody was.
We were stuck on a mud bar up the river, and we were blacked out because you want no lights on or nothing because the gooks would come shoot the mortars at you. But all of a sudden, I'm down below deck, and they come and threw a flak vest and a helmet at me and said, "The Red Cross is evacuating you out of here." And I'm like, "Wow, well, we don't know." He said, "All I know is there's a chopper coming for you. Be here in a couple of minutes." And they put this harness on me and got me up on the deck. It was about 11 o'clock at night, and could hear this chopper, and all of a sudden these bright lights come on, and they hooked a cable on me, and they hoisted me up, and they were still hoisting me up as the chopper was leaving, and the guy's yelling at me when I'm in the chopper, and he's like, And I'm like, what? He goes, sit on your helmet. You want to get your balls blown off? And he's pointing outside, and you can see the muzzle flashes down in the jungle. There was muzzle flashes where they were shooting at us,
Oh, wow.
But that was the most action I've seen.
That's crazy. You were talking earlier about going to school with our dad. That was and Ron Kramer there. That was kind of an interesting story.
Yeah. When we were freshmen in Lathrop there, they were pantsing the freshmen. The seniors were, and they would get you in the bathroom and take your britches off, and they'd take them outside under the library and tie your britches around this pole, and they'd get 10, 15 of these freshmen in there without their pants, and they'd march them out to go out and find their pants. And Ron Kramer was a great big kid, and me and your dad would stand on each side of him, and when the seniors would come by, Ron would say, these guys are with me, and they'd say, well, he's too big to mess with, and they just move on. So, yeah, every night we were waiting for the school bus, we'd stand real close to Ron.
Oh, man.
Yeah, he was a tire guy. Tire guys are always tough. That's later on in life.
Never give any static to a tire, man.
Oh, man.
Did you have a typing class with our dad, too?
That was John Sowers.
Oh, okay, John Sowers. Okay. Hard to keep track of all these stories here.
I don't really remember being in any classes with your dad. I just remember sticking close to Ron Kramer with him.
Yeah.
So how did you get into so you came back from Vietnam, and then what happened after that?
Well, I actually went to work for Muckluck Freight Lines. My dad knew a guy there, and Rex Coleman was running it. There's only 6 guys in Fairbanks, but they unloaded rail cars over at the railroad for Pacific Alaska Forwarders and would deliver the freight around town. And Muckluck had stuff in Prudhoe Bay and Kenai and Anchorage. And so he says, well, we'll see if you want to work. They had a rail car over at the rail yard that was full of 100-pound bags of flour, sugar, and salt for Santa's Bakery. And it's not palletized. It's stacked in there 8 feet high, that whole boxcar. He says, so Ron Eckley and Bill McKnight took me over there and said, here's your forklift and a stack of pallets, and just start palletizing them, And I had a system down. I'd reach up high and just fly the bags and slam them down, and it took me a day and a half to unload that. And I got back over to Muckluck. I told Rex that I was done, and Ron and Bill was standing there, and he says, you're done already? And I says, yeah. That whole rail car? I says, yeah.
By yourself?
That's what he said right there. By yourself? I says, yeah. He turned to Ron and Billy. He says, what's the deal here? He says, this kid did it in a day and a half by himself. Last time you and Bill did it, it took you guys 2 full days to get it done, the 2 of you. So he realized that I wanted to work, and so I was delivering stuff around town with trucks and learning how to shift. And they had a crusher, numerous loads that was going down to Valdez. So Boyd Hartman says, Dave, he says, you're going to go with us, he says. So he hooked me up to the crusher cone, and I was an old, about a 64 Kenworth narrow nose, and 5 and a 4, and I'm going down the road with this crusher, but the steering had a bunch of slack, so that it would go this way. I'd spin the wheel and catch it and go this way, and I was going down the road back and forth because there was so much play in the steering of this old Kenworth. And we've stopped in Delta, and Boyd says, what's the matter with you, Dave? He says, you can't keep that thing going straight down the road. I go, well, I'm doing the best I can. And he says, here, let's switch trucks. He went about 500 feet, and he pulled over and checked the steering. He says, you're a driver. He about drove off the road. So I had to go back to town and get another truck. And then we were hauling stuff up to the Yukon River. And then I I said, well, I don't know if I can go to the Yukon. I said, I'm not shifted yet. And he says, Dave, he says, you just head that truck north. He says, I'll guarantee you'll be shifting by the time you get back. And luckily that was a old B model Mack. And I swear I had the front wheels off the ground on some of them shifts.
Was this summertime?
Yeah.
Okay.
Summertime.
So you went up to the river.
Yeah.
So what was your first impression of getting through these hills, on the haul road?
It was exciting,
You're like, oh, wow, here we go.
It's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Drive truck. And then Crowley Maritime out of Seattle, big corporation, bought Muckluck out because the pipeline was just starting, and they had to have trucking authority in the state of Alaska back then, the ATC. You had to have the authority, and it was real hard to get. So they bought Crowley bought Muckluck out, and they were starting a line board. And the five guys above me, Marty Alt, Bill McKnight, Ron Eckley, Lenny Mosier, they said, well, you don't want to lose your hostler seniority. He says, this pipeline's going to be real quick, and you'll lose your seniority. And I said, no, I want to be a line driver. And, so I ended up being number one at Muckluck. And Fred Eisler, the terminal manager, he told Boyd, he says, well, that kid's too young. He's only 24, and you got to be 25. He says, no, you can get an insurance waiver for him. And so that Fred, he come out and he says, Dave, he says, see that D8 over there? He says, go into Valdez. He says, we'll see how bad you want to go trucking. And I left Muckluck about 3 o'clock in the afternoon and took that D8 to Valdez and showed up the next day, and he goes, what happened? I said, nothing. I said, you got another one of those? So anyway, I ended up being number one out of 100 drivers. Didn't really know how to drive truck very good, but
and you just went and did it.
I just went and did it.
And that's what people did back then,
Yeah.
Was your dad trucking then, or was he done by then?
He was done then. When he lost both his kidneys in 1970, he was trucking the ice roads. He took all that. He would take a D8 to Prudhoe with the cat train, all the scrapers and loaders and all the equipment and the stuff they were taking up there. Then him and another guy would bring the two dozers back to get another cat train together.
Who was he working for then?
Burgess Construction.
Oh, okay.
It would take him 30 days to do a round trip.
Wow.
That was weird. I thought Burgess was part. I was asking Earl Burgess about it, but he said that was somebody different.
Yeah. It was owned by Lloyd Burgess, and that's what became AIC.
Oh, okay.
That was originally Burgess, and they had the camp in Prudhoe, which is the original Crazy Horse camp.
Oh, okay.
Which is down there by where Colville's camp is,
Yep.
The old Crazy Horse pad. That's where Burgess had their camp.
I didn't know they were tied together.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool. Yeah, we found some pictures online of Burgess Construction's camp there at Hess Creek, because I guess they were building that section too. But they built a lot of road in Alaska.
That was Pit 10.
Okay.
I think it was about 28 mile.
Yeah, I think. Yep.
It's up there to the left.
Yeah.
Yeah, they built the taps. Burgess did.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that was AIC. So because AIC fixed that section from 44 and all that over there. That's cool.
So how was it driving the Elliott back then? Was that pretty narrow?
The old Elliott? That's the original Kamikaze Trail.
Okay.
That's why
they
live
called
and good
it that?
to 28 mile. Yeah, it was a lane and a half wide, and if you met a truck in a bad spot, I mean, you guys literally click mirrors. You're lucky if you didn't take your mirror off.
And were you guys going fairly slow, or were you going about 45, 50 on that road, or
maybe in a few spots, but it was pretty slow going because there was so much traffic. In the summertime, the dust. When I was going up there with load insulation one time, and that's when I never had a CB radio, and I learned the value of a CB radio. I come up behind 3 copper freight lines, cement bulkers, and I had a load insulation, and we're by Joy, Alaska, up
Mm-hmm.
going up through there towards Mule Skinners. And the first truck, I could see him in my mirror, and it's dusty, and the guy ain't letting me by. Well, that's the wrong thing to do to me, is try to keep me behind you. Anyway, I get parked down in the ditch, and I passing this guy, and he freaks out, and I guess he got on the CB and told the other two guys, man, this crazy guy, he just was forcing me off the road,
You passed him on the left or the right?
I passed him on the left where I was supposed to.
Okay.
I crowd him to his own side of the road.
You're in the ditch because it's so narrow, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And he was purposely trying to keep me behind him.
Yeah.
And look, that's the thing. These drivers, you get somebody to catch up to you, let them around.
Yeah.
They caught you, they'll be gone.
Yeah.
What they trying to hold them behind you, you're causing an unsafe situation.
Yeah.
So I get up behind the second guy, he tries harder to keep me behind him. And I got by him. And then a third guy, he did it too, and he tried even harder to keep me behind him. And unbeknownst to me, they're on the CB radio, and there's a safety guy for the Teamsters up ahead, and they didn't want Teamsters. Alyeska didn't want the Teamsters to be the safety, but they kind of pushed it. Well, they didn't want any static between the drivers and the safety men. But I got up to Mule Skinners, and the safety guy's Teamster was waving his hands at me. There was an older gentleman, and he starts screaming and yelling at me about running trucks off the road. I says, what? I said, you talk about them three assholes back there? I said, I got insulation. They got cement bulkers. Why were they trying to keep me behind them? He wouldn't hear it. He says, get out. You're going back to town. And I'm like, screw you. And I roll my window up and take off. And the hovercraft was going at the Yukon River at the time. And I could see back there at certain points in the dust that he was chasing me, and I was thinking, well, and there was a 2, 3, 4 hour wait for the hovercraft. I says, well, he's going to catch me anyway. I says, I'll just stop in the Live and Good and have lunch. So he was a ways back because of the dust. And I come into the gate, and the guard come out and took my information. Then I went and was circled around, was parking. Here come this pickup flying through there, and the guy comes running up there, and I turned to try to reason with the guy. He's screaming, yelling, and it's even louder. And I finally just give him the finger and turn around, walking towards the camp, and he jumps on my back, knocks me to the ground, and I throw my head back, about broke his nose. One of his dentures popped out of his mouth, and I turned around and started beating on this guy. I mean, he assaulted me basically, and I'm losing it. And the security guards come running up there, and they're grabbing hold of my arms and legs, and I kicked one of the security guards right in the nuts and doubled him over. And they finally got enough guys to get a hold of me because I just lost it then,
Yeah.
And I happened to know the head guy of the camp there, camp manager, was Craig Golson's dad, and so he called me in his office, and I told him the whole story. He says, well, look, Dave, he says, we just want you to go to town. You didn't do anything wrong. That guy should have never jumped on your back. He says, just go to town. You can come back tomorrow and get your truck. We just need you to cool down. I says, well, how am I getting to town? And he turns to that Teamster safety guy that's got a bloody rag on his nose. He says, well, you got to ride with him. And I looked over at him, and he goes, the safety guy goes, calls the guy out of the office to say something. And pretty soon, here comes this 300-pound welder and says, this guy's got to ride to town too, so he's going to ride with you guys. He got him a bodyguard, I says, no, screw that. I says, I'll walk. And I just left and went out and hitched a ride and grabbed a truck. Come back the next day and got my truck.
So for people that don't know, back then you had to sign into these different spots along the road.
All the
right?
camps, they all had security.
Yeah, because they didn't want just anybody coming up there, right?
Well, they all had security south of the Yukon. They had a checkpoint up there. When you got through the Yukon River on the north side, the camps didn't have security where you checked in. You could just drive right in there and go in there.
But Live and Good had one, and the river. Is that right? Is that what you're saying? Or?
No, just Live and Good. And any of them like down on the Richardson Highway, the camps they had down there at Isabel and Tonsina, they all had security guards right at the gate.
Oh, okay.
But north of the river, because there was no public access,
Okay.
it was closed.
Wow, that's quite a story there. So you rode back with these guys, and
No, I rode back with a truck.
He hitchhiked.
I hitchhiked.
Oh,
They
okay.
wanted him to ride
Oh,
back.
that's right. I'm sorry. I thought they were gonna. Okay.
I was afraid that safety guy was going to have that big welder rough me up a little bit.
Oh, I
See,
gotcha.
I was like, I ain't going around that.
So it probably didn't take you too long to get a ride back because there's so much traffic up there.
No,
huh?
not long at all. Hell no, there's trucks every 5 minutes.
A good deal. So then the next day you came back up, got your load, and then went to Prudhoe with that, or
No, that was load insulation going to one of the pits along the way.
okay.
Huh.
So that would have been early 70s or something like that.
74.
74. Okay.
Yeah, and each trip we would go farther and farther. The road would be open and they'd make the link up, and
So you probably saw quite a few wrecks during that time along there.
I did. And actually, I went up there a bunch with Muckluck's gin pole truck, a bed tandem to bring back and retrieve wrecks.
Wow.
That'd be a full-time job.
Yeah.
A lot of wreckers or winch trucks and stuff back then,
Yeah,
cleaning messes up.
And like I was saying there, the pipe trucks, there was Caps Transport, and Sourdough Freight Lines, and Muckluck that was hauling the 80-foot pipe. And Muckluck was wrecking twice as many as the other two carriers. And so those Pointer Willamette trailers, we had a one that has trailer on a corner, went off the road, and so I went up there with the winch truck, winched the dolly back on the road, and I was with this other Teamster safety guy in a pickup. He says, well, follow us for a while, let's see how he does, and got to another corner and the trailer wouldn't correct and it went off the road.
Yeah.
And I'd winch him back on, and I'm just a kid, but I got to looking, and that back axle, there's a big turntable with big roller bearings in there. And I looked, and because I knew that axle, I could see it when I was behind him driving, that axle was binding up. And those Zerk fittings were all factory painted, and there was not one bit of grease on any of those Zerk fittings. And I told the safety guy, I says, look, I said, I'll bet you this thing needs greased, is all it is. And he's like, well, I don't know. And he looked at it, he goes, well, hell, you might be right. And he calls the lube truck from Live and Good to come down there, and they come and pumped a half a barrel of grease in the damn thing, and he went up the road and never had a problem after that.
Oh, wow.
And there was numerous drivers killed with those things, and that's basically what it was.
Those weren't greased from the factory then?
Muckluck wasn't greasing them.
Oh,
no.
Wow.
And that's funny,
No.
you had to have a self-steering dolly like that. You couldn't do it with pipe dollies nowadays.
No. On the old Elliott Highway, it was just too windy.
Yeah.
And I was behind one time, and I had a load of, I don't remember what it was, tanker or load of acid or something, but I was chasing my buddy, and we're hitting the Koyukuk, and his dolly didn't make it onto the bridge. It went up onto the guardrail, and it was like I was watching it in slow motion, and the whole dolly went off the bridge, and the truck was in the air, and the fifth wheel ripped off and slammed him back down the bridge, and the whole trailer and the load of 80-foot, 48-inch pipe went down in the river.
Wow.
That's how close that poor kid was to dying.
Was that speed, or was that the same problem with the dolly not steering?
That was the dolly not steering. That was before I figured that out.
Are those the 3-axle dollies, the pictures I've been seeing?
Yeah, it's 2-axle, spread, single axle in the back, and that was the steering.
Okay.
And
who built those again? I was trying
Pointer Willamette.
And those were the first dollies built, right?
Yeah, they were the ones that was built for that Elliott Highway. It had to be self-steering. Then one time I was hauling John Sauer back, and at the bottom of the hill below Pump 7, is that the Tatlanika or Teklanika?
I always get that confused.
Yeah.
Catalina.
Catalina.
Yeah.
Anyway, the old road went up on the bluff right there, and it was like one lane road. You know, it wasn't real wide. It was a glacier there, and that really you'd make you want to slide off when the water glacier in the spring. But I was hauling John back coming up there, and a price truck came, and they were stringing the pipe, and they had cable steering trailers,
really?
Like loggers, those cables, and he had two joints of 48-inch, 80-foot pipe, and he came around the corner. We're just coming up top, and I'm 45 miles an hour, and his dolly was right over in our lane, and John put his feet on the dash and his hands on the roof, and oh shit, and I'm trying to slow down, and it's a long ways down on the right side, and I'm right over on the edge, and I could actually feel it. I mean, I was on the edge, and that thing came by and figured it was going to hit us and knock us over the edge, and the thing corrected, and I swear you couldn't have had a fly on the corner of my fender from that thing going by us. That's how close we were.
They probably didn't have pilot cars back then for that long pipe?
No.
Wow, that's crazy.
No pilot cars.
It's like, yeah, you gotta have pilot cars for long pipe now, but not back then on the road was.
No, that don't make sense, does it?
No, it doesn't.
And that's back when they had all the old bridges on the Elliott, right?
Yeah.
Did you guys have a water crossing that you went through? Was that Globe Creek, or that you actually had to go through the creek? Or where?
That's weird. Uncle John was talking about something over there by Globe Creek.
Before the bridge was in. Somewhere around there.
Maybe it was the early 70s. I'm not sure.
That's probably when they was...
That was on the old road over there. That might have been early 70s. We can ask him about it when we talk to him.
Huh?
Yeah, that's a long time ago to think about that. Do you ever remember, Dad was talking about that bridge you were just come across going up that hill about planking them bridges with oversized loads, and I haven't heard much about that, but I've been hearing a lot about it here the last couple of weeks.
Well, it's like they do in Prudhoe. They put those rig mats down, you know.
Yeah.
They had an oversized, heavy load. Some of them old bridges, they weren't very good. Yeah, they'd come and put the timbers down.
And a lot of one-lane bridges out there probably, huh?
Yeah, a whole lot.
It's a different road.
Yeah, so, hold on, this thing's all weird. So then you started driving up there. You were going further north, and when did you start actually, after the pipeline? When did you start driving? Did you continue driving up there, or did you do something else for a little while, or you just transitioned into hauling freight?
No, I just kept on trucking.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I hauled the very first load in the Pump 4 when I had a load of timbers, and there was no fill at the bottom of that. It was steep, and that had the pit marker there, and I'm like, I got to go up there, you know. And anyway, I get up there, and all there was a loader there and a guy in a pickup, and I'm unstrapping the load, and I says, "What the hell are you guys doing up here?" He says, "Well, this is going to be a pump station." I says, "A what?" I says, "We going to fuel our trucks up here?" He says, "No, we're going to pump oil." And that was the very first load in the pump station 4. It was that load of timbers.
Oh, wow.
Just a road up there, huh?
That's all it was.
That's a beautiful spot up there.
It is.
It's a good spot for that pump station.
Never could understand why they wanted that pump station on top of that knob. But
Yeah, it's fun, the different gravel pits and different things that were, and you can't. Some of them they're not even roads up there anymore. But I think Mike was talking about that one up there by Grayling Lake or something, going big old gravel pit back up in there overlooking that lake. But man, there's a lot more stuff back then that we don't even know is there anymore.
Right. Coldfoot was just a storage pad. Yeah. It was across from the camp, and that's where we staged a lot of pipe saddles.
Do you remember when they were building the Koyukuk, the bridge and everything?
Yeah.
Were you trucking up to that point up there and seeing when they were doing that, and they were?
Yeah, before they put the fill at the bottom of the Koyukuk. That was.
Oh, okay. Before they had the fill.
That was damn steep. Yeah, before they even put the fill in.
Okay, so you went up there before they had the fill.
Just a couple times, yeah.
Yeah, we found some pictures of a temporary bridge before they got the first bridge in there, and that was
Old Bailey Bridge.
it's hard to tell. It was like from a helicopter or something like that, but it's a temporary bridge while they're building that bridge. And
There was one at Marion Creek, and you'd hit that thing and you could just feel like the whole thing would go down, and then it catapult you off the other side. It was one of them Old Bailey bridges.
oh man,
So that was pretty nice back then during the pipeline because you could stop at any camp and get fuel, food,
Whatever you wanted.
and
Stop
just
at every camp. If you didn't go inside, we'd at least drive through the parking lot to see who's there.
really?
Oh yeah,
See if any of your friends are around, huh?
yeah,
You probably made a lot of friends doing that, huh?
yeah. Lifelong friends.
That's crazy.
That's how I met you.
So, how come a lot of these guys were wrecking back then? Was it because the road was so narrow, or they're going too fast, or too close to each other, or what? I mean,
distraction, narrow road, driving too fast. There's a myriad of reasons why.
You think there's a tougher learning curve back then than there is now?
Sure was. I mean, you had rock lug tires in the wintertime with 120 pounds of air pressure in them,
Wow.
walking beam suspension with biscuit pads, and no power,
I wonder when.
no lockers.
Yeah. When did you start figuring out the air pressure in the tire? I've just always grown up around that, but it's like, I wonder who figured that out.
Well, originally we figured out. I'm not sure who figured it out, but less air pressure, they ride better, and that far as giving better traction, I never really had much thinking about that until one time for some reason I was spinning on every hill, and it was like, God, the guy's got the same load, he got about the same truck, and he says, well, you probably got too much air in your tires. And I'm like, what? You get out my air pressure gauge, yeah, they was like 110, and lowered them down to 85 pounds and never had a lick of problem after that.
Yeah, I've heard it seemed like John Moore was talking, or somebody like that was talking about putting 50 pounds of air in their tires, and it's like,
That's getting a little low.
I guess a lot of guys did that.
I know Burley was telling me that last summer, Coldfoot. That's what he used to, 50 or 55 PSI. That's what he used to do. And he's like, I never had an issue.
I think it was John Moore a long time ago, and them rocks were big, and it's like you get them tires hard, and instead of the rocks just go right through the tires, and they'd let the air out, and it's like it kind of forms around the tire instead of just blowing a hole in it. And it's you got to balance that so you're not killing your sidewalls.
Yeah, but then running them that low, you're going to go through tires faster on that road. So it just gets expensive at that point, huh?
The road's just hard on things.
Yeah.
I was curious what else you got on your list there.
Well, I used to do a lot of trapping up there while I was trucking, shooting wolves and selling them to the furriers.
There used to be a lot of wolves up there, and people don't realize how vicious those wolves are.
I thinned them out. Yeah, I get $600, for a whole and frozen wolf.
Yeah.
And Wolverine. One time, right there by Pump 3, there was a roadkill caribou in the ditch, and it was about midnight or so, and this Wolverine's down there, and it's 60 below zero, and it was a big cold spell that we had. And I shot this Wolverine, and he took off, and I was shooting 25-06, and so he ain't going far. And I jump in the sleeper, and I get my cold weather gear on, and follow his tracks, and there was a hill there, a little short hill, and you can see where he went up and slid down. There's a little bit of blood, but he made it up that hill. And I got my headlight on, and I'm walking out there, and I forgot my snowshoes. They were in my pickup, and I always carried snowshoes. But I got up there, and hell, it was rough walking. He was still going. Well, what happened was I just clipped the top of his back, and he couldn't use his back legs.
Oh.
I made a paraplegic out of him. So anyway, I thought, well, he's going over there to that creek where all them willows are, and I had another load in Fairbanks. I said, I'm going to go to town, get my load and my snowshoes, and I'll find him over there. And so I went to town, come back, still 60 below zero. got all my gear on, went over the creek, found where he slept, and there's a little pool of blood there, and went all the way up the creek, and I'm just right there half a mile maybe from Pump 3, and I followed all the way up that creek, all the way up to Slope Mountain Camp, followed his tracks. Wow. About halfway along the way, I think he was right there on the bank. But I went all the way up, and then I got up on the bank and come all the way back there, and I tracked him all the way up to that top of that mountain behind Pump 3, and I got all the way up there, but I was gone 12 hours from my truck, 60 below. I didn't take any water, and I'm getting dehydrated, and my knee's starting to give out on me, and I was look at this rock up there, and God, is that him? And so I shot. Well, he jumped up. I couldn't believe how fast he was going. It was wind-packed hard snow, and if I was fresh, I could have jogged him down. But I shot at him a couple times, and I turned around and looked at the road, and I was about 6 miles from my truck.
Oh, my gosh.
The truck's just a little tiny thing down there, and I'm like, and I could hardly even walk, and so I thought, man, I'm in trouble. I was dehydrated, and I sat down on a rock and leaned back into this snow and unzipped my coat, and the steam come rolling out, and I fell asleep.
Oh, my God.
My coat wide open. And this is true story. All of a sudden, I hear this loud voice, and it's my dad. He says, "Get up, Dave, you dumb son of a bitch, get up." I mean, sure as shit. I mean, I heard that. And I opened my eyes, I said, "Dad," and I looked around, and then I looked down at that truck, and all of a sudden I broke into these shivers, chill. I mean, I was literally freezing to death. And I was like, whoa, yo, and I got up and I zipped up my coat, and every step I took, it was like someone was jabbing a knife in my knee. And I just kept staring down. I had my hood, There's probably 40 below up there, but 60 below down by the road. And I was gone 12 hours total. When I finally got to the road, I literally got to the shoulder of the road and tripped and fell on the shoulder of the road. And here come Greg Mitchell with a load of pipe, and he pulls up there, and my truck's a mile down the road, and I crawled up on his running board and hooked my arm in his steering and held onto my arm, and I said, "Take me to my truck." He goes, "Oh, get in, Dave, get in." I said, "No, take me to my truck." I rode on his running board, he took me to my truck, and I spent the next 12 hours in my sleeping bag in a sleeper.
Oh, man.
But it just about froze to death.
Wow.
Probably a lot of stories like that. Probably a lot of people died that way, and you never find them,
Yeah, there was one guy up there at Wiseman that I forget his name. He was at this. They were partying at this mine up. What's that? That creek before where you go to Wiseman. If you're coming south, that creek. There's two of them there.
There's a Hamilton Creek up there, but.
Oh, yeah, I know that's one down the road. That's not it.
I'm thinking of Nolan Creek. That's the mine up there by Wiseman.
Yeah, but you know where the Wiseman cutoff is.
Yeah.
Just the other end of the straight stretch, a mile or two back.
I get all those confused.
There was miners were up in there, and the kid got drunk, but he went to hike over the mountain to go down into Wiseman. It was shorter. And they found him on top of the mountain, leaning up against a rock, frozen to death.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's
wow.
Our grandpa actually froze to death on the Tanana.
Oh, really?
Yep, Jim File.
Yeah, I think that was about 98 or something like that.
Yeah, behind North Pole High School.
Yeah. Yeah, he just went to sleep.
So do you guys know how fast a bear can run?
I bet you do.
Faster than you think. I pulled up there, this grizzly's out there, 100 yards. And I'm in my lane of traffic. I leave the door open on my truck, and I walk to the shoulder of the road, so I'm maybe 20 feet from my truck. And I went, roar! The bear was out there digging up squirrels, and about the third time I did that, he looked at me, and when I I could tell we made eye contact, and I kicked the gravel, and I went roar again, and he started hissing and backing up, and I could tell that we had that eye contact, and I did it one more time, and here he come at me like a locomotive, and he covered half the distance before the message from my mind got to my feet and said, run, run. I mean, he covered half the distance by the time I turned to run. And so I turned, and I go into my truck, and I jumped to grab the grab handle and hit the step, and my foot missed the step. Oh. My knee went into that sharp corrugated step, tore my pants open, bloodied my knee, and I grabbed the steering wheel and flew up into the cab, rammed the CB radio into my head, so blood's running down the side of my face, running down my leg, and I'm slamming the door just as he got right there in the middle of the road next to my truck, and he looked at me and he swatted the gravel just like I did. Say, really? Come on out of there, you think you're bad? I mean, I literally challenged him. And
where was this at, north of the pass or something? Or?
That was just, it was north of the pass. It was right there by Slope Mountain Camp.
Okay.
Right by Slope Mountain Camp.
That sounds like a Chuck Hole Gazette story.
Yeah, no, it's not. It ain't a story. Yeah.
How did you start that, Chuck Hole Gazette?
Well, Bruce Hampton was at Alaska Pacific Transport moving a bunch of modules and a bunch of stuff, and they were screwing up big time. And I made a poster, and I called it Smart Ass Publications, and I started distributing them, and got a lot of laughs out of it, so I did it some more, and they kept messing up, and I kept doing it, and then it kind of developed. I thought, well, I need a better name than the Smart Ass Publications, and called it Chuck Hole Gazette.
That was pretty popular for a long time.
Oh, yeah. Everybody wanted to see it, but nobody wanted to be in it.
I know, I was always hiding out.
And I had a couple attorneys call and threaten to sue me and stuff.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And but I got a disclaimer on the top. It says all of my information comes from a reliable source, like off the CB radio or off the bathroom wall at Coldfoot. And if you believe a word that's printed in this paper, you're a bigger fool than the idiot that writes it. And I showed it to an attorney, and he goes, yeah, he says, that's actually defensible. He says, but God, don't ask me to do it. But yeah, I had attorney for Dave Falk that owned Alaska Pacific Transport. He had an attorney call me up and threatened to sue me. I says, look, what are you going to do? You going to stand up in court and say he's making fun of me? I says, I know how to file a motion. I know how to answer a motion. I know how to file a opposition to a motion, and as opposition to the opposition of a motion. I said, you can create all the paperwork you want. You ain't going to cost me nothing.
You had some kind of rule there for a while. They better let you know first before you find out, or you're going to publish it. Or how'd that go?
I told them they could, if they screwed up, we would hold a roadside confession session, and I'd go easy on them. And I could be bought. Steak dinners go a long ways.
How many of those would you release? Would you do one a month, or did it just depend?
It would just depend on how much time I had and material to work with.
Were you drawing those illustrations?
I was not drawing them. I stole them all out of magazines, and the cartoons, I'd cut them out and put them together, and I'd make the jokes. But
and then would you just go print those, or how would you put them on there? Well,
I'd do it on a big legal sheet, and then I would go and have them printed up on colored paper.
Wow.
And just
That's
distribute
hilarious.
it. I'd put them in all the parts stores around town, leave them at Coldfoot. I like to pick on DOT guys, Ron and Henry. And actually, Henry's wife called up Sourdough and tried to get me fired. And she was all upset about it, so I made sure she was on the cover of the next one.
Do you have all the originals that you made?
I got probably the proofs. I don't know if I have all the originals, but...
Have you ever thought about putting those into a book?
No, but I had them in packets, and I was selling them, you know.
Yeah.
But
I was looking at some earlier. Darlene brought some out, and I was just laughing looking at some of these, and just so crazy that I never really seen it when I was a kid or anything like that.
The joke I got the most laughs out of, Gary Doggett. He's always harassing the waitresses, He was a good guy. But I had a picture of a joke of him sitting at a coffee table at Hilltop, and Susie was taking his order, and she says, "Gary, I'm sure your face is probably very comfortable, but I'd just soon sit on a porcupine." I got more laughs out of that joke than any of them.
That's hilarious.
Then Ron and Henry, when his wife complained, I had a picture of him sitting in an easy chair with a newspaper, and his wife was standing there and had a Christmas tree stuck up her hind end underneath her dress. This Christmas tree sticking out, and she says, "Henry, you never listen to me. I said what I want to do is plant a tree and some grass."
That's hilarious. So you definitely got a lot of heat from people over that. And you would just
I got a lot of heat from a lot of people.
Turn it right around back out.
Oh yeah, there was a driver, I forget who it was at Hilltop. He was gonna kick my ass, boy, and he had 4 or 5 drivers stand up and say, "Well, you got to go through us first."
So Aaron never wanted to be in that. Chuck
No,
Hole Gazette.
I tried to have a low profile. I remember one time I met you over there by Neuterwick. It's like, you said, "Hey, Aaron, how's it going?" He's like, "You know who I am, right?" I was like, "Yes, Mr. Editor-in-Chief, I know who you are." I'm hiding out from you. I was going to do everything just right.
Yeah. It was just a pastime.
Oh, it was entertaining. It was like, yeah, everybody was always talking about it, seemed like.
How many years did you drive truck up there? From when to when?
Basically 48 years. 48 years.
Yeah.
I had a 4-year stretch I didn't because I got in a motorcycle wreck. Got my foot cut off at the ankle and sewed back on, and was out of work for 4 years. That happened in 95 to 2000.
Okay. When did you stop driving up there?
When did I stop? About 6 years ago.
So 2019, somewhere in there?
Yeah.
It's kind of addicting. It's hard to get away from that.
It's addicting. I'm going back.
So you miss it?
Oh, hell yeah. I miss the country and, and the adventure.
Yeah.
And you want to bring the Chuck Hole Gazette back, huh?
Well, not really. That takes too much time.
There's a lot of material up there right now.
What if you had your own...
Well, this is true.
Your own staff, a bunch of people helping write for you, like, okay, help, put this in there, let's do that. Then you could do that, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Maybe that's what we need to do.
I'll sell you my newspaper. I only want $1 million.
That's it, huh?
Yeah.
Have you ever slid backwards on the pass?
Well, I'll tell you, the first time I ever spun out, in the fall of '74, I believe, I was at an Astro, GMC Astro with a V12, and it was Happy Man. And when I hit that hill, I made it all the way to the top. I got through a rock and been on level ground. And I stopped, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, man, I almost made it. I'm going to back down and try it again. Lesson number 1. You ever get stopped in a slick hill and spin out, get out and kiss the ground and chain up.
That's right.
Go up the hill, not down. And I'm all excited. My heart's pounding. And I had a 13 speed. I put it in reversed. I had it in direct, not low. I had it in direct. And I let that clutch out, and that son of a bitch took off backwards. Had an empty flatbed. And I'm a driver. I come back down that hill, and I'm all over the hill. And back towards the bottom where it's long ways down on both sides, my trailer went off the right side, 3-axle flatbed, and so I jackknife. The passenger side of my truck was off on the other side of the road, and the corner of that trailer hit that big steel drum deck I had and kind of locked it in that position, and I ground to a stop.
Oh, man.
And here come a Weaver Brothers truck and pup. and it was old Buck Wilford. And says, settle down, kid. He says, you ain't so bad off. He says, let me chain up. He says, I'll pull you out of there. And he hooked onto my trailer and pulled me back on the road. He said, did you learn anything? I go, yeah, big time.
I bet both your legs were shaking, huh?
Oh, yeah. That was my first winter. Then one time I had a load sitting at Coldfoot that I dropped because the pass was closed. And I went back town, got another load, got up there. And when I went north, Adigan, they were working on the pass, and it was 6 o'clock, and the state says, we're closing the road in a couple hours. And, I was coming down from that trip south, and I had that load at Coldfoot, and they said and it was probably 7 o'clock at night, and they was closing the road. And I'm looking at how it's drifting and stuff, and I thought, I got just enough time to get to Coldfoot and get that load and get back up here and make it back over the pass. And I get to Coldfoot, drop my trailer, and hook on that load of pipe. I go in to get a lunch made, and a bunch of drivers like, you're not going back up. I said, I'm going up there. I said, I just came down. I said, I know I got just enough time to make it. Just enough time to make it. So I get back up there, Chandler Camp, and they got barricades across the road. 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, maybe 11, somewhere in there. And I move their barricades, drive through there, and get back out and close the barricades and get up to the bottom of the pass. Put 2 sets on because I knew I was going to need them. And I start going up that hill and barely making it. I mean, barely making it. I'm chewing and grinding. And I'm thinking, I'm going to be a hero or a zero. And I made it over it. I don't know how. I damn sure wouldn't try that again. But
was it blowing and snowing pretty good, or what?
It was blowing, yeah, drifting.
Yeah.
And I made it over, went to Prudhoe, unloaded my pipe, and when they finally opened the road, I was on top of the pass coming back south. And so I met all them guys that was a Coldfoot, told me I was crazy for going. So, I was like, had chest all puffed out, But it was not the smartest thing I ever did.
You've had some wild rides off that pass, haven't you?
A couple of them. I was in a Muckluck Peterbilt, and it had Vickers. You're familiar with Vickers power steering? On the drag link, it had a brain that had 2 air hoses going to it, and that was part of the power steering. But you couldn't feel the road. They were very strange. In fact, that's why they quit making them. Anyway, I'm going down Adigan empty, doing something, look up, and there was no guardrail then. And I'm going off the road, probably doing 45. Off the road, I'm heading down off Adigan Pass.
You going northbound or south?
Southbound.
Southbound.
I cranked the wheel, and right there was a culvert that stuck out. And my truck hit that culvert. The steering hit the culvert, bounced me back up on the road.
Oh, my gosh.
That's how close I was to eating my lunch there. And then one time, I was in my 75 Western Star. I had my brother Billy. He was pretty young at the time in the passenger seat. And I had an empty tanker. Well, we didn't have maxi brakes back then. And I had an air leak on the airline or something. But I just drained the air tank on the trailer and didn't have no trailer brakes. And it was springtime, slick. Well, it wasn't long before, that trailer pushing and I'm locking up. I ended up bleeding out all my air, and air compressors weren't real good back then. And so my maxi brakes dynamite. So we're going down the hill with the maxi brakes dynamited, and I'm just. My brother Billy's saying, keep it going straight, I'm going to jump. Keep it going straight, I'm going to jump. I said, just hang on. And I would turn the steering and bang my drivers into that big wall of snow on the side. Kept banging into it. It'd slow me down each time. Well, hell, I started getting her slowed down pretty good. And right there at the waterfall, was this big pile of snow that the state had pushed up there, and I just headed right straight at that and cranked the wheel and stuffed my drivers in the front of that tanker right into that snowbank.
That's some good thinking there, driver.
Here's the ticket. When you're in deep shit, you sit up and drive. The guys that don't sit up and drive, they crash.
Yeah, you can't panic.
You can't panic.
You always drive the truck.
I mean, I've been
right?
on the verge of dying. I don't know how many times up there.
Yeah.
One time I was on top of there with that same truck, and we were there 2 days on top of the pass. So they finally get it. The snow blower came up there, and they're not going to keep it open. We're turning around and going back down. They wanted us all to follow them down. So you got that solid wall of snow on each side, and all of a sudden I lost my air and dynamited, and I stopped right in the middle of that cut, and I got my air's froze up, and everybody's yelling like, "What do you mean? We went off this mountain?" And I jump out, squeeze between there, and find the valve on the back. And I don't know if anybody ever changed the valve as fast as I did. I got a couple of crescent wrenches. I got under there, took that valve off, took it into my cab, tore it apart, took a piece of sandpaper because there was a ridge in there for that plunger, sanded it, and I did all that. I'll bet it was 10 minutes. I mean, I got that valve off there and tore it apart, put it back on, it worked, and went on down the hill.
Man.
That's scary to be just sitting there like that.
It was real scary. And then there was another time I went north, barefooted up the pass, had a load of fuel with Colville, and drop off the pass. Nobody said a word. All of a sudden, here's all these spin-out tracks. I start locking up, and I fought it from the top to the bottom. I literally had to squaw handle my trailer into the ditch a little bit to keep my speed down, and up from the top to the bottom. And I mean, I left the worst tracks you could even imagine from the top of that hill to the bottom. Somebody says, "Smallwood, did you leave these tracks up here?" I says, "Yes, I did, and I'm very proud of them." Nobody said a word about that slick hill.
Yeah, I wonder why they didn't say nothing.
I don't know.
It was really getting slick then.
It was real slick.
So, Dave, when you started up there, you didn't have power steering in these trucks.
Some of the trucks, no, we had power steering.
Did you?
I drove trucks without power steering.
Yeah. That's why they had such big steering wheels back then, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you guys didn't have power mirrors, did you?
No, I think those Astros did. Those Astros, GMC Astros, they came pretty fancy.
Oh, did they?
Oh, yeah, we even had an 8-track. That was high tech, man.
Oh, did you have a bunch of 8-tracks?
I did. Yeah, in fact, somewhere I still got the original Sam Little trucking on the Kamikaze Trail, and I got that on 8-track.
Really?
Yeah, well, Singing Sam, he'd be in all the checkpoints, serenading the guards.
Oh, he would, huh?
Oh, yeah.
I always wondered how he got that name. I've heard he was doing some singing somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, do you remember when the ice cut, when they didn't have the bottom filled in?
Yeah.
Did you ever spin out on that during that time?
I got a story there, too. I was in an Astro with a loaded tanker. Actually, I think that might have been an acid tanker. We pulled a Dowell acid tankers. But they had a D8 Cat sitting there with an operator because there was no fill at the bottom, and they had a guy that would hook up the chain or the cable, and they'd pull you up the hill. And I pulled up there, and like an idiot, I didn't get out of my truck. He hooked it up, started heading up to his Astro. The chrome bumper on the front had a hole in the bumper, and just in there was this end of the frame had a bracket on there with a clevis place to run the chain through. Well, the kid only hooked it through the bumper.
Oh, man.
He didn't go make it through the part on the frame. So we get maybe a quarter at the most, and all of a sudden the Cat's heading up the hill with my front bumper. It just ripped the front bumper right off the front of that Astro, and down backwards I went.
Oh, man.
And I kept it on the road. I don't know how I did, but
So, when you guys would get pulled up the hill with those dozers, did you chain up or no? You didn't chain up?
Why?
Yeah.
You're hooked to a dozer, man.
Yeah, so you're going to be fine, and that's
Oh,
why.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Unless they tear your bumper off.
Yeah. Okay, I just wanted to know.
It should have been chained up.
Man, I've never heard stories like that. That probably happened several times, huh?
Oh, imagine. Yeah.
That guy I imagine that kid only did that once, but you probably got different people there all the time hooking that chain.
Yeah, I'll never forget. All of a sudden, there goes my bumper up the hill.
Oh, man. Did you ever tip these guys, the dozer hands pulling you, or no? It was just
I
part of
tipped
their...
my hat at them. That's about it.
I think everybody was making money then. You probably didn't need to tip.
Yeah. So they must have figured, okay, this is costing us too much to pull everybody up here and taking too much time.
Well, the road was under construction. They had plans, and why they ever went up that valley, well, I know why. Is because Sag Bluffs is the nesting grounds of the peregrine falcons. So they got the road going up that valley rather than going back there by oil spill and getting up on top. They just went up the valley and went, oh shit, we can't, they won't let us go there. So they just turned and went right straight up the side of that mountain.
It's crazy because they could have went from Pump 3 all the way to Prudhoe, just following that river. But
yeah,
it's even like all the way from...
It was because of those nesting birds.
Yeah. But even like the bottom of the slide, man, you go up through Anatuvik and all that, there'd be no hills from there to Prudhoe almost.
Yeah, in 1969 when I flew up there on Wien Airlines on F-27, we landed over at Umiat and we landed at Sagwan, right there below those bluffs before Pump 2. There was an airstrip out there. And that was for the geophysical outfits that were doing the cat trains and out there doing the seismic activity. They had them over at Umiat, and they had them there out of Sagwan.
They said at Sagwan they'd found a bunch of archaeological stuff out there, like people live there and things like that. But I was kind of wondering, it seemed like they're trying to keep people away from that, keeping the road away from that.
Yeah. Yeah, that was mainly, they decided they didn't want the traffic going past those bluffs because they thought it'd scare them birds.
Oh, man.
So did you ever train anybody up there? Show them how to drive that road? I'm sure that's a dumb question.
Well, yeah, I took buddies up there and stuff and followed me up. When I was at Muckluck, number 1 on the seniority list, they had me giving road tests. Hell, I barely knew how to drive a truck, you know. So I would take them with a load of pipe out on Blaine Road. And Blaine Road's got that little steep hill there. And I'd make them stop in the middle of that hill and see if they could take off and get going and catch their gears, you know. And this one guy, he'd probably been trucking 30 years. I flunked him. You know, I had to get the truck going on the hill. He couldn't get it going, so I flunked him. Well, and that was in 74. Well, in late 75, Muckluck was closing their doors in Fairbanks and only going to have the Anchorage terminal. And I wasn't moving to Anchorage. So I quit because I had a friend of mine that was a Crowley representative. He worked for Crowley. He told me, he said, Dave, you can find a job. He says, don't tell nobody, but we're shutting this operation down unless you want to move to Anchorage. I didn't want to do that. So I went and took a call for Sourdough Freight Lines, which not Sourdough Express, Sourdough Freight Lines. It was Sourdough Express had double operating authority, and Gene Rogie leased his authority to Eddie O'Rear and Don Spafford, and they started Sourdough Freight Lines. So I went from number 1 to 102 on their seniority list. And when I started over there, old Wendell Hall was a dispatcher. Well, Wendell was driving the road, and I knew Wendell real well, and so Wendell says, glad to have you over here. And he tells this guy, he says, oh, he's doing the paper, he says, you got to give this kid a road test, you know. And I look up, and it was that guy I flunked at Muckluck. Well, of course, the guy flunked me. We got back to the office, and the guy says, yeah, the kid, well, because I was used to driving the V12 with a 13 speed, and he took me out, did a road test, so I was a little rough on the 5 and a 4 with the Cummins because of the quicker the throttle, and it was just would have took me a little bit to get to it. He said, he's too rough on the gears. He says, I'm flunking him. And Wendell looked at him. He goes, bullshit. He said, I've been trucking with him the past couple of years. He says, he's already hired. This is just a technicality. So I just turned and smiled at the guy, you know. But yeah, that was almost poetic justice.
He thought he'd had you.
Yeah, he did too. I couldn't believe it when I looked up and seen that was the guy that was going to give me the road test.
Oh, man.
Then one time I was going by just before pump 3. So all you drivers up there don't always believe a vehicle is going to do what you think it's going to do. I'm following these hunters, and I'm heading south, and I wanted to get by them, and all of a sudden they pull over and start slowing down. So, hell, I jabbed the throttle and started coming around them. And it wasn't dead winter, but it wasn't total spring yet. But all of a sudden, they weren't pulling over. They were doing a U-turn. Down off the road I went, into the tundra. And I'm in this Western Star for North Star Trucking. And it was rough out there. The tundra, and the hood flew open, and I couldn't see. And then I was like, it's gonna stop, and all of a sudden the hood went down. And I looked, and I caught a gear, and I'm out in the tundra, and I'm just going back to the road. I drove it back on the road and kept going. But I had hit a boulder, and it cratered a wheel. I mean, it bent the wheel.
Oh, man.
It's aluminum wheel, but it bent it, and the tire went flat, and Earl Burgess was following me.
So Earl saw this whole thing happen?
No.
Okay.
No, there were a whole bunch of trucks. No one's seen it. So I'm like on the road, and all of a sudden Earl's like, Dave, who ran off the road? He's like, who off the road? I said, I don't know. I was wondering about them tracks myself, and Earl, and I'm trying to change the subject, He's like, I wonder who did that, who did that? And Earl was like a bloodhound. I get to Coldfoot. I didn't want him to see that cratered wheel, so I parked way over on the side in a kind of a weird spot, but got that wheel, I couldn't see it. And like the next trip, Earl still, I wonder, you sure that wasn't you? He kind of started processing, asking these other guys if they've seen the tracks. And it took him a year or so, but he finally pinned me down on it. But yeah,
That's
never
hilarious.
assume that a piece of traffic's going to do what you think it's going to do.
Yeah. Yeah, that happens a lot up there with the hunters coming up there, and they'll be stopped just on these blind corners, and it's like, oh my gosh, these guys are going to get hit or something.
Their mind's not on driving.
Yeah, I come down that 122 dip, and there was a bunch of hunters down there, and it had the road half blocked, and I come through there blasting my air horn. Well, there was a fish and game officer on up the hill, and he pulls me over. He says, I can write you a ticket for harassing wildlife and harassing hunters. I said, no, you can't. I said, I'm coming down through there, and these damn people are walking across the road. I said, I'm just letting them know I'm there, And I had a load of box mud, and on up the road, I was walking around my truck, and there was an arrow stuck in the back box.
Someone shot an arrow at you.
Oh, yeah, they shot into that load because I scared their caribou away. The caribou's coming towards the road, and they're on the shoulder, and they're going to try to get the caribou when it comes up onto the road,
Oh.
Well,
That's pretty crazy. So you were attacked while driving through there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and here's another lesson for people up there. I'm in my 75 Western Star, and I'm at the bottom of the 39-mile Elliott before pump 7, and I had a brake can blow apart, summertime, and the can just literally blew apart. So I'm out there plugging lines and trying to fix it, and then I see this Dodge pickup coming, flatbed, and the back of it's dancing. Rocks are flying, the dust is flying everywhere, and I'm like, fuck, that son of a bitch ain't slowing down, I reached down and I picked up a rock. And I sat there, and this big old gal's driving that pickup. And I'm saying, slow that motherfucker down. And I got this rock like that. She gives me the finger. Hell, I pitched that rock, took her windshield, just spider-webbed it right in front of her face. Big old thing in her windshield. And I I dove back behind my headache rack and my lift axle, and the rocks are hitting the truck and everything's flying, and I'm cussing, and all of a sudden I look up, and out of the dust, here she comes backing up. I'm like, well, all right. She pulls up there, and there was a guy laid down in the seat that I didn't see. He was sleeping, and he says, "Did you just throw a rock and hit our truck?" I says, "Damn right." I said, "Why don't you slow that son of a bitch down?" She says, "Truck drivers don't slow down for us, so I ain't slowing down for them." And the guy says, "You got to buy us a new windshield." I says, "I'll tell you what, you forget about that windshield, and I'll forget about filing charges for reckless endangerment. How's that?" And he called me an asshole or something, and I threw my tools down. I says, "Get out of that. Just get out. Just get out." Not the smartest thing I ever did. He turns to her and says, "Just go, just go." And she hits the throttle, and they take off. Out the window came a .357 Magnum, back, and he shot 3 shots. Pure luck that I wasn't hit. One of the bullets hit and blew rocks all over me. He fired it 3 times, not even looking. Wow. Back in my direction. So I called the troopers from Pump 7, and they take the report and stuff, and the troopers finally got a hold of me and says, "Well, we found out who it was," and it was a mechanic at the Livengood camp.
Wow.
And he says, "We called him in numerous times, got him in separate rooms. Their story was tight. We didn't get to them soon enough to try to get residue off their hands," he says, "but we 100% believe you, and there's not much we can do, and I don't think they're going to pull that crap again," because they shook them up pretty good. Wow. Okay. So 2 years later, I'm walking through Safeway, and there they are.
You recognized them?
Oh, hell yeah. And he's sitting there pushing the cart, and she's doing something, and I come walking right up, and all of a sudden my heart's just a thumping. I hauled off and give that guy my hard knuckles right alongside the head, knocked him down, stuck my foot right in his chest, ready in the riot act. He had no idea who I was, and she's screaming and yelling, says she's going to call the cops, and I just turned around, walked off, and got in my car and left.
Cops ever find you?
No, never. I never heard another word about it.
Oh, man.
That's justice.
Yeah.
It's a Wild West.
So the moral to that story is, don't take a rock to a gunfight. Especially nowadays, you don't know who you're encountering up there. I don't care how mad you get. It just really ain't worth, what can happen.
Yeah, you never know who's going to have a gun, so just...
No.
So, was there a time, I'm sure there's several times there, that you were really scared up there when you're driving?
Yeah. I don't know. I never got scared, maybe concerned,
Concerned, like, am I going to make it through this?
Yeah, like in a blow,
yeah.
It seems like every time I hear a blow and guys dealing with it, I feel like I'm missing out of an adventure. But when you're in it, you just want out of it.
Yeah, those aren't much fun when you get tired. You don't want to go into a blow tired, and you go in there and you get 6-7 hours or whatever.
When that Exxon Valdez hit the rocks, there was a bad blow, and we got out there, got stuck. Alyeska actually come out and opened the road up because they had all this oil spill stuff they wanted out of Prudhoe to go to Valdez quick. And we're out there like, I was 18 hours from Pump 2 to Prudhoe. Got unloaded, and they was going to take another batch of trucks out, and we made it out. Another 12 hours took to get out of there, and here's all these trucks lined up with empty flatbeds. Well, I had an empty flatbed, and they're all heading in there to get more loads. And my eyeballs are like rolling on the ground. I've been up for a couple days and fighting that blow twice. And old Howard Thies running sourdough, he got mad at me because I didn't turn around and follow him back in. They wanted that freight. It's like, Well, he says, we'll find drivers. I said, you can find drivers that'll do it. I says, I'd already been up for 2 days. I wouldn't turn around going back into that crap.
Oh, man. That flat wears you out mentally. That is a lot of work if you haven't been through that.
So you obviously miss Alaska. You miss the Haul Road, and you're coming back. What's some of your favorite spots on that road? Favorite views? Or?
Yeah, it's just all of it.
Yeah.
It's just all of it as a package, you know.
Yeah. It's cool seeing all the different sunrises and sunsets in different parts of the road and all the animals you get to see. It never really gets old, does it?
No. Yeah, maybe for some people, but no.
Sometimes you start
wintertime, I don't miss it in the summer.
No.
I remember my dad wanted to. He'd never seen the road. He traveled Old Hickle Highway, but I took him to Prudhoe, in my old 75 Star with the walking beam suspension, you know, and it was in 1979, but it was rough. It took us 9 hours from Madigan Camp just to get to Prudhoe, and he was going to ride around the slope. I was going to give him a little bit of a tour. He goes, no. He says, take me to the airport. Yeah, he was supposed to ride back with me, too.
He wanted to fly out of there.
Oh, yeah. You know, he was going to fly out of there. He didn't care if he had to wait a week for an airplane. He was not going back down that road.
Yeah. Now it'll take guys, 3.5 hours from Madigan 1 to get back?
Yeah.
Well,
If the road's good and you don't meet a lot of traffic. But, yeah, that's crazy. It used to take that long. Just so rough, and the rocks were bigger back then too, right?
Oh, yeah, huge, especially the Sag Flats.
Yeah. This old river rock out there, feel like you're driving down the riverbed.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah, there was a washout one time in the Sag Flats there, and culvert had washed out, and I was going north with a cement bulker and drove through the washout. And it was pretty deep. I went and unloaded and came back, but I didn't know. But the state had dug it out even deeper. And me and I think it was Ray Cruz was behind me, and I was driving a Peterbilt I'd leased from Louis Pettit, a red Peterbilt, and I come up that washout, put my power divider in, and lockers went down into that. It was so deep, the water come over the hood up to hit my windshield. I mean, it was deep, and it wasn't real far across, and I popped up the other side and barely made it. My momentum and my trailer got in there, and the current took my trailer downstream, so I was like jackknife pulling that trailer, getting it back on the road, and I jumped out and told Ray, come on, and all I seen was 2 middle fingers. After he watched that, there was no way he was coming across there.
He's like, have a good day, we'll see you later.
Yeah. And then that time that New Riderick Creek that it had washed out, the culvert was washing out. There wasn't a bridge there then, and the culvert was washing out, and half the road was gone, and I pulled up there, jumped out of my truck. There was 20, 30 trucks heading south. I just passed them all and went right up to it, jumped out, looked, and Gene Thomas for the state, who grew up at Lakeview Trailer Court, we went to school together, he said, you can't do it, Dave. And I'm looking, half the road's there, you know, and it's about 12 feet down to that raging water, and I see chunks of gravel falling. I go, no, I got just enough time to make it. So I started backing up and started catching gears, and Gene Thomas in the middle of the road, flag in his arms, doing his job, saying, you can't do it, and he jumps out of the way, and I flew across there, stopped. Well, Sherry and Darlene was there in their pilot cars heading south, and I ran back up there, and Darlene or Sherry says, can you drive our pickups across? I said, yeah. I said, run across there quick. And I went over and grabbed both pickups. And when I got out of the second pickup, about 30 feet past there, I got out and looked, and I turned around, the whole road went kerwoosh and was gone.
Oh, man.
So I did have barely enough time to make it.
Was it just one big culvert there at that time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it started, the culvert wore out, and the water was going around. It ended up going past the culvert underneath, and it just washed the whole thing out.
Oh,
I'm
man.
trying to think when they put that bridge in.
They put a bridge in then.
What year was that? Do you remember?
Well,
Seemed like for a long time that bridge didn't have
it was 93 or 94.
Yeah. I didn't even know what the name of that creek was for the longest time. I don't remember a sign being there.
Who in the hell can pronounce it?
Oh, man.
So back then, were a lot of guys using their radios to call out things, or were they just driving their trucks and staying in
No,
their
there
lanes?
was a lot of people on the radio. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How else do you take a break?
Yeah, I need to take a leak here. You want to take a break real quick and come back? You got anything else to talk about?
Yeah.
Okay. That's a good cookie.
I know. I need to stop eating all that stuff.
I know, me too. Dave, a lot of these questions I'm asking may be stupid.
Oh.
Can you not hear? But I don't know all the history like my brother does.
I don't know the history either, but
Well, he knows most of it. Well, what was your CB handle up there?
Well, at Mucklucks, they started calling me the squirrel because of the munchy food I always had in my truck. And I changed it to Tundra Squirrel. Squirrel wasn't enough. So it was basically Tundra Squirrel.
So you kept that, and that's still your handle? to
Well,
this day?
I don't.
just the old timers kind of
Just
know
the
that.
There's a few guys that still call me that.
It's got a good ring to it.
Yeah, I'll send you a picture of my Kenworth's got that. Everybody went through a phase. When I got my 80 Kenworth, I painted the Tundra Squirrel. I had a Tundra Squirrel painted on the side, and instead of back legs, he had these tires slinging Tundra, and he had a gear shift knob. And pretty soon, everybody started getting these little cartoons painted on their trucks.
Yeah, who were we asking about? Was it was Garfield.
That was Donnie McVeigh.
Okay, that's what we thought. Because I remember that as a kid.
Yeah.
That was probably 40 years ago, huh?
Yeah.
So do you got any interesting stories about our dad or our uncle up there? Any?
None that I can really remember, but yeah, I trucked with John quite a bit.
You never put him in your little Chuck Hole Gazette?
I think he was gone by the time I started doing that.
Okay. Was that
Or by golly, I might have.
was that late 80s when you started the Chuck Hole Gazette, or when did you start doing
That was in the 90s.
Oh, the 90s.
Yeah.
Oh, Tundra Squirrel. Okay. Yep. Aaron's showing me a picture of the Tundra Squirrel in the
Yeah.
sleeper there.
That's when I had my small sleeper. There's another picture there with a big sleeper because I stuck it through a guardrail at 24 Mile Elliott.
Yeah.
Went 150 feet down the hole.
That's the big sleeper there.
But
That's a cool truck.
So can we go back to the Kamikaze Trail? Did they just call that section of the Elliott the Kamikaze Trail, or was it the whole road?
well, they were kind of calling the whole road, but basically that's referring to that old Elliott Highway
Yeah.
Well, it's funny.
because there's so many wrecks, head-ons, guys side-swiping each other.
Yeah.
The taps too. That everybody's kind of confused about the taps, but to me, the taps was always live and good to the river.
That's the taps.
So, and some people don't even.
Because it was built so long before the other road up north. The Elliott went to Limegood, and they called that the TAPS, the Trans-Alaska Pipeline System Road.
When did they build that? Do you know?
Well, early 70s, I believe. I remember my uncle came up, and we went up there looking. We drove up to there looking for Diamond Willow. And
So you could drive the taps when they first built it. It wasn't private then.
it was
either.
always open to the public.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I don't know. Dad was working for D8 Company in the early 70s, doing road jobs and things like
Right.
that. But he's He hasn't been very clear. He can't really remember some of that stuff back then, but it's kind of neat to hear about some of that history.
Well, the more and more we talk, the more he remembers and the more stories that come out. And we've interviewed him 3 or 4 times now. And sometimes you hear stuff, or even driving truck with him. He talks about the sag of '85. You probably knew what that was, when right there just north of Dietrich, when the pipeline started sinking in the river, and then they brought it up, that double pipe crossing.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know that was the sag of '85.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they printed T-shirts and coats. And
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
I've never seen those.
Yeah, all the guys that worked on it.
Yeah, nobody talks about that. But that was 40 years ago.
So carrying chains, some guys don't want to carry them in the summer. I'm going up Adigan, no chains. July, spin out, snowing, and I get on the radio and this guy's going by, chained up, and he says, "I'm going to tell you there, kid. Anybody stupid enough to come up here anytime with no chains deserves to be sitting right where you're at."
Wow.
And he trucked on.
Do you know who that was?
He bitch slapped me with reality. 30 years later, I'm going up Adigan. Here's a guy spun out, July, snowing. The guy wants me to drag a set of chains back down to him. I says, "Well, I'm going to tell you something. Anybody come up here this time of year with no chains deserves to be sitting right where you're at." And he's like, "Wow, that's kind of a bad attitude." I says, "And another thing, pass it on." And I kept trucking. Probably wasn't good. Somebody else helped him out, but it's like, pass it on, dude.
Well, yeah, back then, you needed chains in the mud sometimes. It's like you always need your chains. It's like, I remember Dad talking, you'd get fired if you run off the road on the Elliott with no chains on in the summer.
Going up Connection Rock, up Stormy, 2 ruts so deep with mud, you're high centering. You got chains on, you're just chewing. Yeah, numerous times. Mackey, same way. I remember going up there one time with a winch truck to get somebody, and I had the rear window roll down that winch truck, and when the mud started hitting the inside the dash and up in the inside the windshield, I had to hurry up and roll that window up.
Oh, man.
But I got 3 stories on unorthodox ways to get the road fixed when it's rough, and it worked. I'm not advising anybody else to do it. The road was rougher than heck, and I was talking to Dwight, the foreman of the road, and they won't let me fix it, Dave. And Princess Tours is running up there with tour buses, and he says they just won't give me no overtime, and they won't let me run any equipment. And I'm really mad. Well, I get back to town, disguise my voice, come up with the name and this little story, and I call Hal Hume, who was the head of the Northern District. It was Dwight's boss. And I told him I was executive director in charge of safety and maintenance for Princess Tours. And I says, I just took a trip up that road, and I'm advising to my people that we pull all the buses off until you can get that fixed, and gonna look into pursuing the state for damages for lost revenue. And he's like, "Oh, wait. I says, I'm on my way to Juneau. See if I can get some pressure put on you from down there." And he says, well, can you give me a week? Can you give me a week? And I said, just a second. I got back, I just checked with my secretary, and she says, I can go to Anchorage, take care of a couple things, and I'll take another trip up the road if you think you can get it straightened up in a week before I go to Juneau. "Oh, yeah, we'll get her. We're in the process of getting it fixed." And I went to Prudhoe, beat the hell out of me all the way up there. And on the way back, I meet Dwight, and he's in his pickup because I'd already been talking to him about the road, and he goes, "Dave, I can't believe it, man. They told me to pull out all stops, get that road shaped up. Money's non-object, just get it fixed." And so then another time, the end of the runway, the Dalton Highway ends out there by where Bryce is. The state says no, it ends right there. And the oil companies were saying no, it ends over where the spine road is. All the way around the airport was deep holes. It would take you 30 minutes to go around the airport. I mean, and so I'm going around there, and a truck goes into the holes this way, and it snapped back, and I smacked my head into the side window. Why it didn't break, I don't know. And I'm getting mad. Well, I went over to the airport and talked to the guy in the tower. I says, look, the state don't even drive around that damn thing. I says, they cut across your runway right there. And there's a road right there. They go across the runway. I says, you're going to have 50 trucks a day crossing that runway, so you better get a CB radio, and we'll ask for clearance before we do. And he's like, well, you can't do that. I said, well, that's where we're coming. I says, you better beware. So you'd think that would get a little steam and they'd fix the road. Oh, no, they put a gate up over there so we couldn't come through there.
Oh, man. So
the next trip, I go over there and get hold of the state foreman, and I'm just shaking. I'm so mad. I says, look, I'm going to put an ad in the Fairbanks paper and the Anchorage paper. You don't claim that damn road. Oil companies don't claim it. I said, I'm going to give you somebody 30 days to respond to who owns that road. And if nobody claims it, I'm claiming it. And I'm going to maintain it, and I'm going to charge a toll. And then I went over and told over at ARCO, I told the head of the road maintenance over there, exact same story. And then I went to Caperic to unload. And when I came back, there was 2 state blades out there and 2 oil company blades blading that section of road.
It didn't take very long either, did it?
No, it didn't take long at all. And then I'm coming north one time, and it's just before freeze up. And north of Coldfoot, you can't even stay in the seat. It's so rough. And it's getting ready to freeze up. And I'm coming south, and I meet Vern Boughton, who's a blade hand for the state. Here he comes with a blade, but the blade's in the air, and he's just bouncing along. I says, where are you going, Vern? I'm going to blade the road into Wiseman. Bernie told me to, the foreman. I said, that's not even a state road. What about this? He says, well, I told him these truckers are getting damn mad, and he said, screw them truck drivers. I says, where's that son of a bitch at? And I'm just mad. He said, well, he went down to Jim River, but he's on his way back. You should meet him. Boy, I took off, and I got over by Grayling Lake, and here he come. I broadsided the road, blocked the road, and he pulled up there. And I told him, what the? He says, well, what? We'll blade it when we damn sure feel like it. I said, we keep hitting them bumps, all us drivers, and we're getting madder, and we're getting madder and madder. Pretty soon, smoke's coming out of our ears. We're so pissed off. And I says, and we know where you live. He says, you come around my house, I'll blow your head off. And I says, well, just remember that if you're ever sound asleep and you look up and see a silhouette at the doorway, don't worry about it. It's a janitor. He's coming to clean house. And he threw that damn truck in reverse and slammed his brakes on, spun around and spun rocks and took off back towards Jim River. And the next trip, I'm heading up there, and here's Vern, and I'm talking to him on the radio, and he's blading the road, and he goes, stop. And I stop, and he get out, and he says, did you see Bernie the other day? I says, yeah. I told him the story. He says, well, you scared the holy hell out of him, man. He said, fix that road and do it now. Got the road fixed. I can't dazzle people with brilliance, but I can baffle them with bullshit.
That's funny, because Dad was talking about back in the day it would take half an hour just to get through that section just north of Coldfoot. He's like, well, half an hour till Coldfoot. Was it 5-6 miles where it was super rough through there?
Well, Grayling Lake area was real fine material and washboard. I mean, bam, 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 bam. I always wanted to get a state worker. I wanted to snap a bucket seat into my fifth wheel and give them a pair of goggles and strap them in that seat, and them state workers, and take them for a ride.
Sound like a fair ride.
Yeah.
You could probably charge money for that.
So the road's improved since you started up there.
Yep, from what I hear. I'm going to check it out, so.
That whole section from north of Pump 2 they paved and raised that section, and now they've got so many delineators out there. I mean, there's probably one every 30 feet, Aaron.
Yeah,
you think?
they were doing all that when I left.
Okay.
Yeah, I was working for Bryce, and they had that first section, and
Yeah.
they raised the whole thing up.
It's amazing that there's no drifts anymore. There's no drifts there. There's no drifts from Slope Mountain over to. They've raised all that up, man. It's nice.
Trying to remember what I was going to say.
So I got a poem called "Caught in a Blow." Did you ever read that?
I haven't.
Was that in that?
Chuck Hole Gazette?
No, that little book she had. That
Oh,
Bob Tater.
Tater Bob.
Tater
Bob.
Bob. Tater Bob.
No, this is one I wrote because of Tater Bob. Bob, we were joking one day. I said, that's nothing. I said, I can write a poem. And he laughed. He said, you write me a poem. Well, I wrote a poem called "Caught in a Blow." You want me to read it?
Yep.
Sure, why not?
And it's based on a true story of a blow that we encountered. All right, it's kind of long, but
All right, you got 10 seconds.
all right. With Prudhoe getting closer, and with the appetite of a beast. Now these words all rhyme. I'm not a poet. I'm not insinuating that, but it's all word rhymes. With Prudhoe getting closer, and with the appetite of a beast, I couldn't wait to get there because the food they serve is fit for a feast. Then out of nowhere, the winds slowly start building out of the east. God, I hope it don't get any worse, to say the least. With over 50 miles to go, and the wind's getting stronger, the farther we went, the road was looking longer. Then it started to get white and hard to see. I said to myself, man, this ain't for me. We prayed and we hoped that we would reach the end of the road we called the beach. And when the sun fell from the sky, if I said I wasn't concerned, it would be a lie. The only thing you could see was a big white wall. I thought to myself, I hate my job. I don't want to be here at all. Now the drifts were starting to get deep. We could barely move and was down to a slow-moving creep. We had 21 big trucks and was running single file. After 30 minutes, we'd only went another mile. With the winds gusting about 80 and the temperature at 0, the one that was in the lead was without a doubt my hero. Hour after hour, we crept along. I was getting so tired, to stay awake, I had to sing a song. Someone on the CB said, what a bitch. I don't know how it happened, but I'm in the ditch. Wait for me, I'm gonna get out. The truck's here to stay, without a doubt. I grabbed my mic and said, grab a chain. He said it was no use, we'd need a crane. So I told him to shut off his motor and catch a ride. The only thing hurt was maybe his pride. I gunned my motor, it was starting to bog down. I had a sinking feeling in my gut from that awful sound. Then into the raging storm I had to go. My air cleaners were full of ice and blowing snow. The wind had a bite that reached to the bone. I got reminded how much my truck felt like home. The line of trucks was getting smaller and smaller. Every so often you'd hear someone holler, I'm off the road, I'm on my side. I lost my load, I need a ride. So I told him to put on his cold weather gear and bundle up tight. Then catch the first truck before it got out of sight. The drifts were getting longer and they started to get deep, so we parked bumper to bumper and it was now time to sleep. The winds howled and howled on through the night, and in the morning there was quite a sight. 15-foot tall drifts were all around us. I looked out my window and started to cuss. The winds quit about noon that day. With a little bit of luck, we'd soon be on our way. The snowplows were on the radio and working towards us. We all started yelling and raising quite a fuss. I started thinking about that big steak and about that lunch I was going to make. As we rolled into Prudhoe, we were glad to be there. For the past 18 hours, we had quite a scare. I looked out my mirror and was counting trucks. Out of 21, there was only 12 that had good luck. The rest were in the ditch or broken down, but the drivers were safe and were wearing a frown. The Dalton highway truckers do all they can to miss a North Slope blizzard, but to outguess Mother Nature, it'd take a trucking lizard.
Wow, that's awesome.
But I'm not a poet.
So what did the guy say when you?
Oh yeah, he loved it. Yeah, and I wrote another one for him. His son, Tim Burt. I wrote another one. I forget how it went, but it was it was Tater Bob, and I said, and Tim wanted to stand up and fight because anyway, Tater Bob had named him Tater Tot. I forget how that one went, but
So Tater Bob, was that his handle?
yeah,
Okay. And
Yeah.
who did he drive for?
Sourdough
Okay.
Express.
Is he still around or?
He's down in Sweet Home, Oregon. In fact, in 97 or so, when 97 or 98, I was getting surgeries in Seattle on my leg when I had that motorcycle wreck, and I was staying with my mom and grandmother down in Springfield, Oregon, and I knew he was up at Sweet Home, and it wasn't far from there, and I found out where he was, and literally I pulled up in front of his house. He had cows and stuff, and he had some kind of bucket of feed and was walking in the cow shit with rubber boots, and I pulled up there, and he was wondering. I was on my Harley, and he was wondering who the hell it was, and I had a good chat with him. I don't know, that was a long time ago, but I'm not sure if he's still alive or not.
Do you know how many of those books he did? Those poem books? Because I was looking at that was volume 2 or something, book 2 or something like that.
Like there was 2 or 3.
I'd never seen that book before.
I never had either.
I didn't even know it existed. That was cool, and I'm sure a lot of people would want to know where to get more of those or look at that.
Yeah.
But, how many miles do you think you got on the haul road?
Oh, I couldn't tell you. I'd say it's in the neighborhood of 5 or 6 million anyway.
Oh wow,
it's a lot. The only one that actually had more time than me up there, more miles, I figured, for a long time. There's probably might be a couple more now, but it was Shanky John. He's like the ever-ready rabbit. He actually started driving up there a year after I did, but man, he's been steady Eddie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So you're coming back.
Yep, going to come up and do another winter.
Wow. Watch out, right? Here comes Dave.
Yep. Why am I doing it? Because I can.
Well, Dave, thanks for coming on, and thanks for sharing some of your stories. And
fun.
We'll probably do it again if you're coming to Fairbanks to drive truck. We'll have you come in there.
I could do it like I wanted to do it to begin with, in a truck shop.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Alrighty. Thanks again.
Thanks.
Cool.
2 years later, I'm walking through Safeway, and there they are. And I got this rock like that. She gives me the finger. I was born in a communist country